Hey everyone, I am Caitlin and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a full review of The Gentle Art of Fortune Hunting, which came out on the 24th of February. I initially thought that this book would just be a simple 3-star read for me and a good way to round out my February reading with a lovely historical romance. I was pleasantly surprised. This ended up actually being a 4.5-star read for me, and I genuinely very much enjoyed myself, even though it was very short at just under 300 pages. Like with all of my full book reviews, this will be separated into 4 distinct segments. 1 is a teaser. This is if you want to go in completely blind. 2 is spoiler-free review. 3 is spoiler-filled review, and the 4th is a discussion where I want to go and dive into any of the themes or any debates that are happening within the community. Without further ado, let's hop into the teaser. This book was very reminiscent of Red, White, and Royal Blue, but with a Pride and Prejudice twist. It is a historical enemies to lovers LGBTQ+ romance. It pulls all of the best tropes from those genres in my opinion. It has intrigue, it has steamy sections, and it has scandal. As I said before, it is a relatively short read at just under 300 pages, so if you are looking for an LGBTQ+ romance to pad your bookshelves and collections, please pick this up. It's a great one. And without further ado, we'll head right into the spoiler-free review. Again, if you want to go in blind, this is a great place to stop. The Gentle Art of Fortune Hunting follows 2 siblings as they ascend into London's highbrow society, looking for an advantageous match. Coming from absolutely nothing, the siblings soon set their sights upon an heir and an heiress respectively, but things don't go as planned when a relative of one of these targets ends up interfering with their plans. This book does not dive a lot into characters, so if that's something that you're really interested in and a must for you in your romance, I would suggest reading Sarah J. Maas or Red, White, and Royal Blue over this one. Personally, I wasn't going into this expecting a really great cast of characters beyond the main 2 love interests, so I was not disappointed by what I saw, but I do recognize that that is one of its weak points. It is definitely a steamy book as well, so if you are not looking for that, you might want to skip this one, but at least it's steamy without being worrisome. I'm looking at you, Den of Vipers. All jokes aside, I thought that the romance was really well developed, especially given how few pages this book does have. I thought that they built it up very well, but I will warn you, about 100 pages in, it feels like the narrative completely changes, so do keep that in mind when you're reading this book. The drama in this book also leans more towards fun rather than just frustrating. They tend to communicate badly, but they understand at the end of the day that they are people, and that happens sometimes, and it never really blows up into a big thing. That is a plus in my book because I hate that trope, but I know people who love the bad communication or miscommunication trope. You're probably not going to be as happy with this one. Finally, there are some great themes in this book, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the discussion, including what it means to be deserving and what is beauty, true. And that is it for my spoiler-free review, so let's go ahead and fill this thing with spoilers here. This book pleasantly surprised me. For one, I ended up really liking the fact that beauty was such a big part of it and a big aspect, as well as this kind of thought-provoking process of what is marriage material or worthy, especially in a historical context, and kind of looking at this through an LGBTQ+ lens as well, because obviously things were much harder back then. I feel like that's the dumbest thing to say ever, like, yeah, that's an understatement. Either way, yeah, it's interesting to see that take on it. They obviously have a lot of anxieties throughout the book about being discovered and disowned, not accepted by their families, shunned, all of that. And it kind of plays twofold because Robin and Marianne have this issue revolving around their upbringing and them being fortune hunters, but you also see it through the Hart and Robin relationship and not wanting to be discovered and disowned there, as well as Hart kind of putting up a protective barrier with his body image issues and how he sees himself versus Robin, who he's always kind of comparing himself to in a lot of different ways. And it takes Robin taking Hart out of his head to fully realize that he is worthy of love and that Robin is also worthy of love, as is Marianne, which I think is the biggest part of that. And again, I'll go into this in more detail in the discussion. I was just pleasantly surprised by every aspect of this book, especially the issues that each character is dealing with. I thought that they put a lot of care into exploring what their kind of feelings were in the moments, and I think that's kind of what ended up winning over the book for me, especially the fact that they did this in so few pages. Of course, it has steamy scenes, and I love them, and it does really take a kind of left turn 100 pages in when they strike up this deal, but it really does kind of address the plot as a whole and the society as a whole, which I really appreciate. I also wish that we had gone a little bit more into detail about Robin and Marianne's past. I feel like we touched on it, but I feel like that could have been such a longer book. And I feel like that's always my criticism of every book I read. If it's under 400 pages, I'm just like, it could have been longer. I would step around if it was longer. And so that's kind of my main criticisms of it. But overall, I thought that the ending was a little cliche, but just the build-up and the society and the world, and I love Alice. And I really do love how all of these characters are endearing and have anxieties and fears and things that would have society shun them in different ways. You have Edwina, who's just been so down on her luck about love, and she's just kind of always gotten it wrong, but she tries so hard and loves with every part of her. You have Alice, who's socially inept, but she is so smart and witty and still like just so kind and trusting, and it's wonderful. You have Hart, who has so many insecurities about himself due to his mother, and he kind of builds walls up around himself because of that, even though he just vastly wants to protect people. And then you have Robin, who lets his mouth get away from him, Marianne, who has a temper, and all of these have just so much charisma about them, and it makes it really feel like the society is fully well developed simply because they do have things that they're really worried about coming out about them, or that have already come out and kind of haunt them. I do wish that they would have explored Marianne and Giles a little bit more, because when it got to the big them breaking up or them not getting together, I guess, I felt like it was underdeveloped, and it would have been a really good plot point, and it would have been something I would have been interested in following. Would have. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is when it does come to those kind of sex scenes that are scattered throughout the book. I do like how they put themselves in a scenario in which it could have become very iffy and dubious consent, but they really double down on the fact that no consent is a huge part of this book and it matters to these characters, and that's not always the case in romance, so I'm glad that that was a plot point. My final thing is that I love Alice. She's so cliched, and those tropes are just so tropey, but I love them every time they come up. And Robin. He just tries so hard to be bad, and he's such a good person, has such a big heart, and even Marianne is like, come on, dude, we're trying to be evil here. Can you get with the program? And he just can't. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on the characters. Time has passed and my lighting has gotten considerably worse, but that's what happens when you're working a job. Anyways, things I wanted to talk about, discussion-wise, was mostly the big theme that I have been mentioning previously in this video, which is that of what does it mean to be deserving of love, as well as what does it mean to be marriage material, which is a very common theme in most historical romances, but I think the other part of this that makes it interesting is the fact that it's LGBTQ+, and so there's just another element on top of that. So what we see a lot of is Hart feeling like he is not worthy of love because he is brutish, he does not have the features that define good-looking people like Robin does, and he tends to not enjoy social gatherings as much, mostly due to being let down continually in the past, either by Edwina's husbands or by his mother, who basically just drained them dry. You also have Robin and Marianne, who came from very destitute circumstances, who are now being thrust into high society, and even though they believe they are marriage material, obviously the society as a whole does not. So there's also that kind of juxtaposition happening. And this is all in the context of a gay relationship, which in this society and this age is completely frowned upon. You can go to jail for it. So there's a lot of different aspects that are all being played with when it comes to marriage material deserving of being loved. And I think that the way that this book talks about it and discusses it is very good. For example, I really like that Robin sees the beauty in Hart even when Hart cannot see it himself. And it is through Robin's love that Hart originally begins to question his views on fortune hunting in general and those in destitute circumstances, namely Robin and Marianne. And he begins to realize that he may have treated Robin really poorly before this whole arrangement began and they fell in love. But even further than that, he's been treating Marianne poorly by seeing her as less than and Robin as an exception, which is completely uncalled for. And it is that designation of calling Marianne Robin's little sister that finally shows that he understands Robin's predicament and the hardships that he's gone through to be accepted by society. It also very much shows the insecurities that Robin's been having this whole time over whether he is deserving himself or if he is a good or bad person. So all of these little aspects kind of join together to make a very cohesive theme that I ended up enjoying a lot and wasn't expecting out of this tiny little romance read that just seemed really quirky, cliche, and kind of all the tropes that I would love. Anyways, those are just my thoughts. I would love to know if you guys have read this book, any of the thoughts you have on the matter, especially these themes that I am so in love with. Did you like these tropes? Did you hate them? Is it your kind of just guilty pleasure, or is it just me here? Anyways, definitely leave a comment below, and I will see you in the next video.